Hey guys, how we doing? Welcome to the video. As always, in this one we're going to look at something just a little bit different. We often talk about Salefreaks, we often talk about how to list items and a lot of the stuff within the Salefreaks platform, but I think this is a very worthy topic and one that comes up quite often in the communities, people asking questions around this, and that is feedback. Okay, so how important is feedback? What impact does negative feedback have, and what we can do to prevent it, and what we can do to fix it if we do leave someone with a negative experience which causes them to leave us negative feedback. Okay, so first of all, is positive feedback important? Yes and no. So if you're a new seller, brand new to the eBay platform, and you're trying to build trust with not only eBay, but also the people that you want to buy your products, so the people that are going to be looking at your listings and buying your listings or reviewing your listings, which would be eBay in that case, you want to build up positive feedback. Now, as you grow, whether you have 100 positive feedback or 1,000 positive feedback or 5,000 positive feedback, that's where it matters a little bit less. Obviously, there are still people that will look at two like-for-like products. They'll compare on price, and then they may go with the person with the highest feedback. But generally, what people like to see is, the majority of the feedback that the seller's getting is positive. And in actual fact, I would say, and this is just my opinion, that a lot of people shopping on eBay rarely even look at the feedback in great detail. As long as someone has numbers beside their name. You can see mine up at the top here. I have almost 61,000 positive feedback. They're looking at those numbers and they're just saying, okay, is this person fulfilling orders? Are they getting positive feedback? If the answer is yes, 9 times out of 10 they'll be fine with ordering the product from you. And in reality, like I say, there's not very often do people go into it in great detail and really pull everything apart and decide if they're going to buy the product based on the number of feedback someone has. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. The next question is negative feedback bad? Okay, and again, it's a bit of a yes and no. Well, it's always bad. Okay, negative feedback is always going to be construed in a negative way, of course, but there's a very large difference, or a very big difference, in terms of when negative feedback can impact you more. And again, if you're a new seller on the platform, and let's say you have 5 orders, and you send those 5 orders and you gain negative feedback from 2 of those orders, and 3 of them you might not get any feedback at all, that's going to have a very negative impact for your account, because the reality is someone with a negative experience is going to be way more inclined to leave a negative feedback than a person with a positive experience will be inclined to leave positive feedback. So I generally find maybe 1 in 5 buyers will leave a positive feedback. But if someone has a negative experience, there's a good kind of probably 90% chance, I would imagine, that they're going to want to leave that negative feedback. In some cases they don't, but that's the general rule in anything is, bad news travels fast. It's the same as like if people are reviewing restaurants, people are more likely to give a bad review than if they have a good experience and give a good review. And it translates pretty well over here. Now, if I have an account like my own where I'm getting tons and tons of positive feedback every day, and then the odd day I get a negative one, that will be just drowned out in the positive feedback. But very early on in your eBay selling career, you want to make sure that you do everything possible to build up your positive feedbacks and build up your trust with the buyer, and not only with the buyer, but also, as I mentioned before, your trust with eBay. Because if they're looking at you as a new seller, and they often do in the first 30 days, really scrutinize, like, what's this person listing? Are they competitive? Are they fulfilling their orders? What are their buyers saying? You could very easily create a lot of red flags for yourself if you leave a negative taste in someone's mouth and they leave negative feedback for you. So it is important to really try and understand that. And a lot of the time, prevention is always going to be better than the cure, and we're going to talk about both of those things. Okay, so first of all, if you're a new seller and you've got zero feedback on your account, you open your account, it's just a zero. You've got no positive, you've got no negative. What you can actually do is build your positive feedback in a very simple and straightforward way. You get positive feedback a lot of the time for buying an item. So when you're a seller on eBay, eBay encourages you to leave positive feedback for your buyers, okay? And often you can actually leave automatic feedback. So if you have a big-ish kind of store, most people will have automatic feedback. And a lot of the time, the thought process behind that as well is if you leave someone feedback, they will leave you feedback in return. So what you can do is when you're a new seller, you can buy anything that you need off eBay, or you can buy a lot of cheap 50 pence, 50 cents, 99p, 99 cents items, spend maybe, a couple of bucks, couple of pounds, and actually gain 5, 10, 15, 20 plus positive feedback before you even start to sell, which means if you do get a rogue one negative feedback, it's not going to have as big of an impact if your first sale results in a negative feedback. Now, you'd have to be very unlucky to get that, because the reality is, even as a dropshipper, most of the products that you send out, the buyer receives, and the buyer will either leave no feedback or positive feedback. They have to have a very bad experience to leave negative feedback. So that's one little easy way of building up some positive feedback before you start, and then even selling your own products from home, where you're in full control of the product, the condition, how it's sent out, how fast it's sent out, is another way where you can gain, that little bit of positive feedback before you start to bulk list and drop ship on the account. Another question that I often get when someone starts selling on eBay and they're trying to build up their feedback as well is, should I chase for feedback, or should I message the customer to request them leave positive feedback? And ordinarily, again, I would say yes and no. It's really up to yourself. I feel a lot of the time feedback will just come naturally. But if you wish to ask your buyer for positive feedback, I would do it in such a way where it just feels like good customer service. So what I would be doing in this case would be kind of following up with the customer at every step. So when the customer buys the product, maybe thank them for the product and say, we'll get this out in the post to you in the next couple of days. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your business. And that's kind of already starting to build up that little bit of rapport with the customer. When you receive your tracking information, it might be a good idea to just let them know the item has now been shipped. This is your tracking information. Send them the tracking link where they can click on it. They can follow the tracking. And then if you keep a note of that tracking yourself and see when it's delivered, you can also send them a little message to say, I can see that your item's been delivered now. I hope everything was to your satisfaction. If you have any issues at all, please feel free to reach out and discuss it with me. And if you are happy with your item, if you wouldn't mind, leaving me some positive feedback, it would really mean a lot to me as a new seller on the eBay platform. And really, once again, really appreciate your business. Thanks very much. Sign off with your own name or something like that. And I feel like that kind of message is a lot better than just kind of straight up asking for positive feedback. You can tell them you've left them positive feedback as a buyer, and you're really grateful for the transaction, the speed of payment, all this kind of stuff. And that kind of rapport building should hopefully, if they read their messages, prompt them to give positive feedback. Now, I know I've bought tons of stuff on eBay, and sometimes over the years I'll leave positive feedback straight away, and then other times I'll go back into my account and I've maybe bought 10, 20 items, and I'll click in and I'll see that there's a message to say that I need to leave feedback. You can actually see somewhere, I think possibly on your orders page or down here in your shortcuts, it's somewhere on the side. Sometimes it'll flag up and say, you know, you need to leave feedback, and I'll go in and I'll leave feedback for maybe 10, 15 items that I've bought over the last 6 months or whatever. So sometimes, you know, people don't leave it straight away, but all of a sudden you'll get it later on. But as I said in the beginning, over time, naturally, you will get more positive. You will get more positive feedback. You'll build up the account. If you get the odd bad one, that is okay. And like I say, it's probably 1 in 5 that even bother leaving positive feedback. Anyway, you could probably say yourself, you know, how often do you leave a review anywhere where you buy a product? It's eBay was kind of the original eBay users. This was kind of like really one of the biggest mechanics within the website, that you can leave, you know, this positive feedback. And I think with a lot of people that's stuck. So people are probably more inclined to leave feedback on the eBay platform as maybe they would do on any other website. The other interesting thing about eBay as well is people can leave feedback about you, the seller, and also the product, which I've always found, you know, it's a bit annoying, because if they complain about the product itself, you know, that's very much out of your control in any stretch of the imagination. So, I mean, let's say it's quite within the buyer's right to say, leave negative feedback because they didn't like the product. There was nothing wrong with the product. They weren't complaining about the price. They weren't complaining about the speed of shipping. They weren't complaining that it was damaged or anything like that. But they can just simply leave negative feedback just to say they didn't like the product, or didn't look like the right color, or, you know, whatever. And these, you know, these can be a little bit annoying. So like I say, trying to prevent these is the best way possible. And even just, you know, as a general rule of thumb, even if you're not chasing feedback, and this is where it comes into sort of, you know, prevention is better than the cure as well, is you can, with every purchase, send a message out to the buyer just saying, you know, if you have any issues, get in touch. I'd be more than happy to resolve any issues beforehand. Now, it's a double-edged sword, because obviously you don't want to prompt them too much to be, you know, looking for a partial refund, or, you know, whatever this kind of offer that you're maybe going to give them is going to be. But I feel that's definitely a good way of kind of getting them to come to you before leaving them negative feedback. Because some people just say, you know, seller ignored me, for example, and they just leave negative feedback. So again, if you kind of message them first and say, you know, thanks for the purchase, any issues, please do not hesitate to get in touch. And you can add in there, especially before leaving negative feedback or leaving any negative feedback, you know, customer service is of utmost importance to me, and I'm here, you know, to listen to what you say. Also, like I just mentioned, I'll see a lot of negative feedback for, you know, the buyer, you know, the seller ignored me, and therefore I've left this negative feedback. So if someone does have an issue, let's be really open about trying to resolve that issue. At the end of the day, they view you as a business. So whether you're doing this as a little side hustle, or whether this is going to be a fully fledged business, as far as eBay are concerned, this is a business. And even if you're just selling personal items and you're not even drop shipping, the buyer is buying something off you on eBay's platform. Okay, so they expect a certain level of service, a certain level of commitment, and a certain level of resolution if something goes wrong, as do eBay. So it's both parties here. It's both eBay and your buyer. Let's treat them with some respect. Let's try and resolve their issues. And you're a business at the end of the day. Okay, so what would you want? You know, put yourself in their shoes. If something went wrong, and let's say received their item, the box has been damaged, it's, you know, whatever the case may be, and they're not happy about it, you know, ignoring that message, number one, is just going to cause that buyer to be even more upset. They may go to eBay, they may report you. You want to avoid any kind of confrontation. The best thing to do is handle that situation head on and basically say, look, I'm really sorry, first of all, that you've had this issue, and I would like to try and resolve it. And maybe ask them the question, how can I help you resolve this issue? And see what they have to say. You know, ask them the question, you know, what would make this right? What can I do to help you? And depending on what they say, that might not be the resolution you come to. If they ask you for a full refund and they want to keep the item as well, that's a bit hardball. So I would say, look, I'm not happy. I'm not happy to do that. If you said the item is okay, the box was maybe damaged or something like that, would you accept a partial refund on this? If the item's, let's say it's a £20 item, I would be happy to reimburse you with £5. Would that be acceptable? And by the way, if they accepted that, for example, and then went on to leave negative feedback, eBay in a lot of cases will remove that feedback or allow you to go back to the buyer and request a revision of that feedback based on the resolution, and they will turn that into a positive experience, or at least a neutral experience. And I'll come on to how you can do that in the future. But there has been times where I've come to a satisfactory resolution, in messages with a buyer, and they've went on still to leave negative feedback, which I think is a pretty poor way to act from a buyer, because you've went out of your way to make a resolution with them. So try and come to some resolution with them, where both parties are happy with the outcome. This is a business at the end of the day. There will be some transactions that you will lose money on. That is just part of the game. It doesn't matter what type of business that you run. If you run a business, you will have some losses from time to time. And to be honest, taking those losses and keeping your customers happy is, really part of the overall goal here. And not only keeping your customers happy, but if eBay see you as a seller that is willing to, resolve things with the customers without them stepping in, these are the types of seller they want on their platform, that really value the customers and really value the platform. If you are, playing hardball, not willing to bend and resolve things with your customer, that it's going to become apparent. You have to accept that some of these situations will arise. Sometimes you will have to bite your lip. You will have to give people the benefit of the doubt. Yes, there's a lot of people out there just looking for a free lunch, as the saying goes. They're going to try and scam you. You have to treat everyone with the same respect, basically. And unless someone is quite obviously trying to scam you, you could have situations where their claimant item is not received, and you have the tracking, to show this, and you can show eBay. That's your job done. You don't have to bend and break to these kind of people. But there's obviously a lot of genuine people out there, and all they want is a little bit of resolution, or sometimes they just want an acknowledgement of, they might even just be, venting to you, letting off a bit of steam. You just trying to resolve that situation. They might just say, you know what, that's cool, and they'll not leave the feedback at all. They'll maybe leave neutral feedback. So I feel it's really, really important to acknowledge it. Take the problem head on and try and resolve it. Okay, so let's see how we can potentially remedy situations maybe after they've happened. Let's say the buyer gets their item, they don't even read their messages, they're unhappy, and they just leave their negative feedback for whatever reason. If we can go in to our feedback, we can click on the feedback, and we can see, all our positive, neutral, and negative feedback over the last 12 months. Okay. Now, admittedly, my feedback has dipped quite a bit, actually, over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, with various issues, dropshipping related, non-dropshipping related, and also eBay's policies for seller protection have changed slightly. They used to automatically remove a lot based on a seller's ratings. I don't think they're allowed to do that anymore. And also, what I would like to express is having negative feedback, or having a lower than 100% negative feedback is actually fine. It doesn't affect your sales too much, unless you're a small seller and that rating's dropping way below, sub 90%. It's not something you need to worry about really clinging on to. You know, it's absolutely normal. You know, for Amazon sellers, you know, I see people with 90%, 85%, and, you know, they're absolutely fine. I mean, yes, we're talking about eBay, but just bear in mind, this is a big store. It's got, you know, almost 61,000 of feedback since 2005. A lot of that coming in the last 5 or 6 years as a drop shipper. I think I started this account as a non-drop shipper with about 500, 600 positive feedbacks from selling, you know, my other stuff. So we can see here, we can see your positive feedback over the last month, 6 months, 12 months. We can see here detailed seller ratings. You know, everything's 5-star in terms of delivery time, accurate description, postage cost, communications. You can click on whether your feedback is visible to everyone. Let's just have a look. You're unable to change your comments visibility because you have active listings. Okay, so if you have no active listings, you can turn this on. If you have active listings, people must be able to see your feedback. You used to be able to have it on private, which means they could only see the feedback and not the item. So you can see here people just, you know, tend to just leave normal positive feedback. You know, again, if you're new to dropshipping and you haven't started dropshipping before, another big worry is for the people that, you know, getting their items in other suppliers' boxes, brand and whatever. You know, you can see here for the most part, you know, I am very happy with this transaction. And that tends to translate right across the way. I mean, we have a negative feedback here. I asked the seller to cancel it because I was waiting too long. You know, is this fair? Yeah, it probably is. If the item has come late and then they asked to cancel the item, but we'd already sent it, and then we've probably requested that they do a return and they've not been happy with this, you know. So you're gonna get those normal cases. Now, what you can see beside everyone here is you can see a reply button, so you can send a reply to the people that leave positive feedback and say thanks for your positive feedback. I don't think there's any real advantage to doing that, both with the buyer and with eBay. I think it's maybe a waste of time. I'd be interested to hear any comments or anyone else's thoughts on that. I certainly have never done it. You can see on the negative feedback, you also have two different options here. You can have report this buyer and you can have request revision. So report this buyer would be reserved maybe for someone that was using profanity in the feedback, although I think most of it's blocked by eBay itself. But if they were, you know, lying about something, or it was, you know, like I said, it would have to be something bad really to report the buyer. And the next one is request revision. So this would be if you wanted to request the buyer to change their opinion of the feedback or change their feedback decision. With this option, you can click on there. Okay, so with the feedback revision request, you can see you can request one feedback revision for this order. Make sure to let your buyer know why you're requesting a revision. And you can see here, I resolved the buyer's problem with the transaction. The buyer confirmed that they left wrong feedback or other reason. Okay, now put yourself in their shoes. This person's had a negative experience, whether they're right or wrong, they've decided to leave negative feedback. So I would suggest, before putting in a feedback revision, I would suggest reaching out to this customer and say, look, you've had a negative experience here. I'm really sorry about it. What can we do to kind of figure this out now? If the transaction's cancelled or it's been returned or they've been refunded, maybe you can offer them a coupon off their next purchase. Maybe you can offer them another refund, an additional refund for the trouble. Or maybe you can offer them a replacement item or something else, you know, free of charge, whatever that may be. I don't know the exact resolution that you want to offer them, but I would try and agree that first and then say, look, you know, if we can come to some sort of resolution, would you mind, you know, removing the negative feedback? And I personally, with this one, I would say, you know, do they need to turn negative into a positive? No, I would say, look, even if you change this to a neutral feedback. It would really help me out. I'm really sorry about this, and people leaving negative feedback, it really has an impact on the business, and I don't want you to have this negative experience with me. I just want to come to a resolution. It's a lot easier to do that in the messages rather than kind of send through a feedback revision. They'll see a message about it. They may not even see the message, but let's say they see the message and we're just point blank trying to say, we want you to change your decision on this. I know what I would say. I'd just ignore it flat out, and I wouldn't revise, the feedback. Whereas if we can get agreement within the messages, first of all, then we can complete one of these boxes, okay? So you resolve the buyer's problem with the transaction. That will be resolving them in the messages. They come to an agreement. If I do A, you will do B. In other words, if I resolve your problem, you will reverse the feedback, and they say, yes, I'm happy with that. Perfect. You now have that in writing. So you can click this box here and you can enter a comment. As per our messages, this is what we agreed. Please, resolve and change the feedback. In this second option, we have the buyer confirm that they left wrong feedback. So you'll see this quite often, and quite often it can be the reverse, which is a good thing. But let's say we see a negative feedback, but in the comments it said everything's fine, perfect, great seller, and all the rest of it. You haven't seen any messages from them to say otherwise. They may have just clicked negative by accident but left a good comment. I have seen it quite often. So again, what I would do is I'd message the buyer and say, look, is everything okay here? You left negative feedback, but your comment was positive. Is there anything that I need to know about, or would you be willing to change that feedback? And a lot of times they'll just say, oh yeah, it was a mistake. I'm happy enough, that's cool. So you would send that one through again, just pop in the comments, spoke to the buyer in the messages, this is what's happened, this is the outcome, this is the agreement, bang. Other reason might be something like they tried to contact them with regards to return, whatever. Something just isn't right, or the issues maybe with the courier, which is out of your control. So it could be something that's completely out of your control, and that's the reason. But again, I would always suggest contacting the buyer first and coming to that agreement. Now, the other reason for doing that is one, it's a courteous to the customer. Number two, if they decide to not bother responding to the feedback revision, so let's say a couple of days pass, they don't do this, you don't want to keep following up with them, but let's say you follow up with them and say, look, I've done my end of the bargain, can you, complete the feedback revision? And let's say they just ignore you. Well, then you have an audit trail for eBay, that if you do need eBay to step in and remove this feedback, you've got that audit trail, you've got confirmation from the customer that they have agreed to remove this feedback. So you've now got that, so you can then go to eBay with that, and eBay will then likely just remove the feedback altogether. They'll not change it to positive, they'll just remove it, which, to be honest, is as good as, realistically. It's as good as a neutral that you might have been trying to go for in the first place. So just on neutral feedback, although it's a little bit annoying, you would rather have positive, it doesn't count for anything. Realistically, you may as well not have left feedback at all. So the way feedback's calculated in terms of your percentage, in terms of your positive feedback, it is the positive feedback minus the negative feedback, and that gives you your overall score basically. And a neutral, as far as I'm aware, it just doesn't count as a number at all. It's just like it's just a neutral, as it says. So it's like 0 on the tally basically, whereas a positive is +1, a negative is -1, and neutral is just 0 basically. It's nothing. So you can see as well here you have feedback revision request. Now every account is different based on the amount of sales. It's based on a percentage or something like that. I think it's a minimum of 2 or 3 or 5 maybe, and then if you do so many sales over and above that, you will get these feedback revision requests, and I think they refresh every now and again. So you want to try and avoid using these. I don't know how many I have to start with or how many I have left, but that's the way it works. You can see here another one. I haven't received this, just the cover came and not the crate. So this is probably one of those ones, from quite recently that we'd want to try and go through and get a resolution from the customer. I'm actually just taking a note of this here because I want to make sure that my staff and the people that are looking after this store are actually actively doing this. Sometimes when you have people working for your store as well, you need to give them a little nudge to remind them of these things that, you know, will obviously have a negative impact on the store, and make sure that they're doing these kind of things all the time. So if you're just working on your own store, these are the kind of things you want to be checking on daily. Have I got negative feedback? How can I turn this negative into a neutral or even a positive in some cases? So, I mean, this person has got one positive, right? So if I click this, it's probably the positive feedback I've left them. So this is the first time maybe they've ordered on eBay. You know, they're saying that, you know, only part of the product came. They now have, you know, they now have a negative experience. And it is me. It's my auto feedback that has went on for this item. Just the cover came and not the crate. So let's have a look at the actual item itself. Because sometimes what people do, they'll not actually read the listing. So this is something that's £16. It's a heavy-duty 30-inch folding pet dog puppy cat training cage crate carrier. Okay. Durable material made with tough polyester cloth with a PVC coating. The comfortable texture of this dog crate cover will calm your dogs. So it's saying cage cover. There's a lot. I mean, I'm not going to read through all that, but this person thinks they're getting the cover and the crate. They are not. It's saying easy to install, premium design. Nothing talks about the crate itself. You know, this would be one that I would be potentially appealing. I would probably reach out to the customer first of all and see if we can get some resolution on this. I mean, you could probably say that this shouldn't be crate carrier, it should be crate cover. But it's fairly obvious that the crate wasn't included. Now, I could go back and look at messages with this customer and all these various different things. I'm not going to do that for the purpose of the video, but you get the idea. This is where someone can say, leave negative feedback, and it's not, this one probably isn't fair. Maybe a bit of the benefit of the doubt would creep in here and say the listing isn't overly clear. You know, for me it's 50-50. It probably is 50-50. It says crate carrier. I'm saying it's not the crate, but then also, you know, it doesn't specifically say cover. I would say crate cover rather than crate carrier. It's that these last three words here. Cage crate carrier. I mean, if I'm honest, I'm probably swaying with them, but again, probably a message or two to the buyer would be, you know, I'm really sorry, I wasn't really that clear, but as you can see, you know, it is, you know, point to the other things that suggest that it is just the cover. Also worth noting, by the way, if just like I said in the beginning, the feedback, whether left as a buyer or a seller, all counts in the same feedback score. So a buyer looking at you would actually have to go in and click received as buyer, received as seller to see what your feedback's like for a seller. Most people do not get into all this. So we've tried to look at the prevention. We've discussed that. We've had a look about coming to a resolution, potentially the cure of, you know, how can we turn these around? How can we create, you know, a positive experience out of a negative experience for the buyer, or even just get them to neutralize their original feedback. Again, all with some sort of resolution. So what do we do if we cannot resolve with the buyer? Maybe it's an unfair feedback and the buyer is ignoring us, or something that we have agreed, like I said, with the buyer, and then they haven't completed their end of the bargain. Where do we go to next? Okay, so we need to speak to eBay. We need eBay or someone else, basically, in this case a customer service representative, to have a look at these issues for us. So let's take the crate example, the carrier or the cover. We've tried to, let's take for example, we've tried to reach out to the buyer. We haven't come to a resolution with them, and we believe that that feedback is wrong based on the fact that they just didn't read the description of the item and they didn't see that that was in fact just for the carrier. So what we do, go into the help and contact button at the top of the page on eBay. It's right here when you log in. It should follow you around on every page that you're on, I think. And then we can see here, request to remove feedback. You can also see here that this has got selling issues in general, okay? So you can review any policy issues, you can review or request a selling increase, you can see if you have payments on hold to get paid. You can see returns and refunds for sellers. This is any live or closed refunds in terms of return cases, items not received. And you can see request to remove defects, okay? So these are all things that you should be exploring, but for today we're going to look at the request to remove feedback. So this is great because, like I said, it's all in the one place, and we can see that we've got all these issues here. Look, I have no shortage of negative feedbacks. I sell a lot of products. That's going to result in a few people not being happy. Very, very normal. And whilst I want to keep this to a minimum, I want to resolve these issues. It's just part of the game. Okay, so here's the one here. I haven't received this, just the cover came, not the crate. Okay, so with this particular one, I would go in there and then we can see the various different options here. Okay, so we can see the top one, profane or inappropriate remarks. So again, I mentioned this before. This is something that you would want to report the buyer for maybe in the overall feedback page. So this is if some, it is what it is. If they're using profane or inappropriate remarks, whatever that may be, we can get that feedback removed. 9 times out of 10, eBay won't even question it. If there's profanity in there, they'll remove it. Personal information included. Let's say they went beyond the realms of my imagination here and started looking you up on social media or something and started mentioning or threatening members of your family or something like that. To be honest, I've never come across of any issue where I would have to get it removed because of personal information, but I guess it's there for a reason. It doesn't follow eBay policies, examples, legal concern, manipulation, extortion, or whatever. So eBay don't allow any kind of manipulation or extortion in terms of feedback. So this would be someone saying, I'm going to leave you negative feedback unless you refund this item or send another one. eBay have policies. They have returns policies, they have items not received policies, and as long as you tick those boxes, they can't leave you a negative feedback. So let's say they threatened you with, I'm going to leave negative feedback unless you let me keep this item without returning the item after them originally saying that the item was broken or something like that. So you have every right to request they send you a picture of the broken item and also give them a return label based on eBay's policies. Yeah, so the customer just decides that they don't want to follow the policies. They just want something that's absurd, and they then leave you negative feedback based on this because you don't give in to their demands. Well, then you can say to eBay, look, I've actually tried to resolve this with the customer. I've offered them a return. I've offered them resolution to this, and they've threatened with negative feedback, and now they've left negative feedback. 9 times out of 10, again, this will just be removed. Again, if you have a case that was resolved in your favor, so let's say, for example, they said the item wasn't received, your tracking shows it was delivered, they asked eBay to step in, and eBay said, yes, we're closing this case in your favor, and then the buyer leaves negative feedback. In this case, they will remove the negative feedback. Okay, so very, very straightforward. Any other reason outside my control, examples, weather disruption, technical issues, buyer error, things like that. So that would be if someone left a negative feedback to say the courier was rude, or the courier, left the parcel in an unsafe place or something like that. Well, we can say the item was shipped on time, it had tracking, this was the tracking link. The buyer obviously received their item. They didn't express any issue with the actual item itself. eBay should remove that one. Again, if the item was late and we can prove that, there was severe weather disruptions, usually, on the media and things like that, it happens. eBay will protect your feedback. There is other cases where you can kind of chance your arm as well, you know, with various different feedbacks. Like if it was based on, you know, something else, you could say, look, it was out of my control. You know, let's say the item did ship late and it did arrive late and it is actually your fault. You can chance your arm and say it was a reason outside of my control. Let's say you could say we had a power outage at our warehouse, or a power outage in the office, or, you know, some sort of technical issue which meant you couldn't physically process the orders. Whatever the case may be, you could say the post office, you know, were experiencing technical difficulties, or, you know, something like that. I would say it's always good to try and chance your arm. If there's ones in there where it's a bit dubious and the reason why the person's leaving you negative feedback is because of one of these things. Also, if it was a comment like, you know, just didn't like the item, you know, you'd be using that other reason, and you'd be making a note in the additional info saying, you know, I've had other people buying this item, the reviews for the item overall are good. You know, the buyer's saying that they just didn't like the item. That's not really a negative, you know, experience as the buyer. It's not really a negative experience from, you know, the seller's point of view. I've done everything that I said I could do. It's outside of my control if they just didn't actually like the item. They got the item, the price they paid, the delivery they received, and the item that they got was correct. Therefore, this is out of my control. So that's just a couple of ways which you would look at it. No matter which option you would take, I would put in as much as additional info as I can. Always basically making out that you are there to provide a good service. You're there to provide any resolution for the buyer. Note them back to any previous comments or messages that the buyer has made to you, especially if they're being abrupt or using inappropriate remarks or whatever else. You can note all that. So anything that's going to help your case, you should be putting in this additional info box. So hopefully, guys, this is really helpful to you, and I would love to hear your experience with removing feedback. If you have any other tips or tricks in terms of getting this feedback removed, that would be really helpful. I have heard of people in the past that have requested a callback from eBay. So a lot of the times the automated services can be dealt with by automated services in return, you know, bots, AI, whatever. And I've heard a lot of positive experience of people requesting callbacks via the live chat and then actually speaking to the customer service representative over the phone and having a way much higher success rate, even on the basis of they will remove feedback just as a gesture of goodwill, you know, a one-time only, look, I'm going to remove it this time for you. Same with defects, same with any issues that you're having with cases being closed. By you speaking to them on the phone, not only is it harder for them to say no to you, but also you are building up that trust with eBay that you're a genuine person, you're really trying to resolve the issue. So that's another thing to consider as well. You can do that via the help and contact button again. I believe you just scroll down to the bottom and you can click on the have us call you button as well. So guys, hopefully that is really helpful for you. If you are an existing dropshipper or new to dropshipping, maybe you have these concerns before you get started. Hopefully this video has served you well and you've gained a little bit of knowledge, regardless of, you know, whether you're selling on eBay right now or you've been selling on eBay for a number of years. We always try to bring as much value and help you guys as much as possible. So I just want to make everyone aware that if you don't have a Salefreaks package, these are our packages on the website, and also we offer a full package where we monitor your listings. You can list automatically, you can automate your orders, you can optimize your titles via the AI solution. We also offer a service whereby we will process all of your orders for you from Amazon UK. If you're drop shipping, we will do that without the need for you having any of your Amazon accounts. And also we have a full drop shipping guide right here at the top of the website on salefreaks.com. If you haven't seen this, whether you're an existing Salefreaks customer or not, a lot of people miss it. you can click here and sign up on our Teachable website, which gives you a lot of tutorial videos which will help you navigate the Salefreaks website. But as always, thanks for listening. If you've got to the end of this video, I appreciate it, and I will catch you on the next video. Thanks.